Welcome back. In this video, we'll be looking at the if statement. So the if statement is a conditional that checks whether or not a certain condition is true. So let's open up JShell and create an if statement. And you may be wondering, why do we sometimes use JShell but sometimes Eclipse? Well, JShell is better if we're just testing out a few lines of code quickly, but Eclipse is better if we're creating a project with classes. So first, let's look at an if statement in JShell. So to begin, let's just create an integer. Int I is equal to 30. And now we can create an if statement. So the way that we do it is like this. If, let's use it to test if I equals 30. And then if that's true, let's print I is equal to 30. So now when we run this, it prints I is equal to 30 because this condition is true. I is equal to 30. So let's look at another example. We can also use greater than or less than. So let's say if I is greater than 30. Is I greater than 30? No. So it doesn't print anything. But if we were to say if I is greater than 25, it does print it. Let's just change the print statement to be I is greater than 25 instead. And so it prints I is greater than 25 because I is equal to 30, which is greater than 25. Let's look at another example. So we can also use an if statement with booleans. Let's create a boolean b is equal to false. And now let's create an if statement. If b equals false, system.out.println b is equal to false. And it prints b is equal to false because false is the value that we gave it. Another thing we can do is check if a condition is not true. So let's use an if statement. Again, if b is not equal to true. And for is not equal to, we use an exclamation mark and an equal sign, like this. So if b is not equal to true, then again we can print b is equal to false, because false is the only other option. So if b is not true, then we know that b must be false. So now that we've had a brief look at if statements in JShell, let's switch over to Eclipse. Okay, so before we start, let's create a new project for if statements. A new Java project. And let's call it conditionals. And for the module, just click on Don't Create. So now let's create a new class called, let's call it if statement runner, and let's add a main method and finish. So now in this main method, we can create a variable. Let's just create an integer again. Int number is equal to 45. And then the if statements will work just the same as they did in JShell. So if number equals 45, then print I is equal to 45. So now if we run this, it prints I is equal to 45, just like it did in JShell. But now if we change the value of the number, it's actually called number, not I. Let's say we change it to 25. Then if we rerun the program, it doesn't print anything because this condition is no longer true. Another thing that we can use with if statements is the modulus operator. If you remember, we looked at it in the data types section. So let's check if number modulus 2 is equal to 0. So what this does is it checks if the number is divided by 2, it checks whether or not the remainder will be 0. And 40 divides evenly by 2, so the remainder will be 0 for this. Let's just print true. And now let's run this. And it prints true because 40 can be divided evenly by 2. And then again, we can also use the less than and greater than operators, just like we did in JShell. So let's check if number is less than 100, then print true. And it prints true because 40 is less than 100. Okay, so I think that's enough for this video. And we're looking at more on if statements in the next video.